Hey everyone, I'm Nick from Watch Collecting, and today I'm very happy to be joined by a undeniably passionate enthusiast and watch collector whose daily watchwear routine ranges from a JLC Reverso to a Mojave IWC Pilot's Watch Chrono on a bright orange strap. Emily, great to see you. Thanks for coming down. Today we're covering something a little bit meaty and a little bit controversial. You may be able to tell by looking at the watches on display here what we're going to get into, but first I thought it would be important for us to do a little wrist check. Emily, what's on the wrist?
It will come as no surprise that it's an IWC. It's my current love affair, but this is the titanium Journe 40. Recently got it in January actually, but it's become, dare I say, I changed my mind quite a lot, but it's my favourite IWC at the moment. It beats the Mojave right now. And thanks for bringing up the orange strap. People have fallen out with me near enough over that. That did not go down well.
Really, I feel like it kind of suits that watch a little bit because it is a kind of monochrome aesthetic, that watch, and the orange brings a little bit of vibrancy to it.
A little bit of fun.
Exactly.
A little bit of playfulness, but that was divisive.
Okay, interesting. And so you're saying the Journe is the number one watch for you from IWC right now in titanium there?
Yeah, the titanium, not the steel, specifically not the steel. I love the titanium. It just wears well. I throw it on, I forget about it. And also it photographs really well, which shouldn't be a reason you love a watch, but I think it just shows that the proportions work. And I have a really good friend who wasn't into IWC at all, and I wore this to the pub one night when we were meeting, and he's obsessed now, he really wants one. And I think it just has that kind of thing that when you put it on, you go, oh, okay, I get it. You kind of have to wear it. It's a fun watch.
I always think it's like an interesting test of a watch's popularity when you hand it to someone who isn't into watches, and if it strikes a chord, you think, okay, maybe there's something about this that's special.
Absolutely. I mean, there's one watch here that I just didn't get, and then I picked it up and said, oh, and then that's it. Now it's love affair number 2.
Well, I mean, I guess in that case, let's jump into this topic, right? Because quartz is controversial, and it has been covered a lot of times before. I've seen and read a lot of stuff on quartz watches, but I think today's discussion will kind of frame it around like its place in the luxury realm.
Yep.
Because to kind of provide some framework of the discussion, it's like quartz is something that came in the late 60s, early 70s as a cheap, low-cost alternative to mechanical watches. And I think that's where people's reservations about quartz really come in, because it has that low-cost kind of feel to it. But as we've seen over the years, different manufacturers have lent their hand to quartz in a more luxurious way, and we've had some really interesting results. So I did want to ask you, actually, since we're talking about watch collections, do you currently own a quartz watch, or have you ever owned a quartz watch in the past?
Yes. So the very first nice watch I had, my nan gave it to me. It's not a brand that we'd know. That's Quartz. I have a Moon watch or two. I think they're cool. I recently got the Snoopy Moon watch because, again, just a bit of fun. But I love it for what it is, and I have the Tag Heuer F1, the vintage F1. That's. I've never worn it. I just have it. Won it at auction one day, and then I was, it just arrived. So they're the only 3 I have. What about you?
Okay. No, never.
None?
No, never at all. I've considered certain quartz models. I think the latest watch in quartz that I wanted to buy was the Tank Must.
That's a fun watch.
Fun watch. And when they came out with the colored dials, I was like, wow, like this is
really
such
cool.
a nice move from Cartier. But I guess it's worthwhile actually going back in history a little bit, because quartz decimated the Swiss watch industry. And I think that's why a lot of people feel like it's almost a dirty word. And there's people that have a lot of trauma from quartz who would have been involved in the Swiss watch industry in the late 60s and early 70s. So I think if we talk about the first watch here, which is a Rolex Oysterquartz Date 8, and interestingly, Rolex actually combined forces with a number of other Swiss watch manufacturers to develop quartz. And I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, when else would Swiss watch brands come together like that to collaborate? Like that is something that now I feel like would never happen.
No.
And so I think it's a really interesting part of Swiss watchmaking history. So initially they created a movement called Beta 21, which was part of this collaboration. And then after a few years, Rolex decided we're going to go out on our own and develop our own movement.
Textbook Rolex move.
Textbook. You know, I feel as though nothing's ever good enough for them. And I feel like other manufacturers are just holding them back.
100%. They're like, this is the same company that makes their own steel. Like, of course they did that, of course.
Exactly. So they went off and made their own quartz movement, and that's what we have inside here. They made two variations, one for the Oysterquartz date just, and then one for the Oysterquartz date that we have here. Mm-hmm. And this is just a really interesting piece of watchmaking history, because Rolex is really known for mechanical watchmaking, and they're a pioneer in that space. And all of a sudden we've got a ticking seconds hand.
Yeah.
And it's funny to me because even now these watches aren't overly popular.
Yep.
And they're still, I would say they're still considered to be bargains on the watch market. And I guess it raises the question, like, do people have a real problem with quartz movements inside of a Rolex? Like, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I grew up and my family don't collect watches, nobody's into watches, but it was just a thing that if your Rolex ticks, it's fake, right? Sure. And it's maybe like when you first start getting into watches, the easy thing you can look for is if somebody's hand's, you know, if you can hear a tick or if you can see the second's hand maybe clicking along, it's not this, you know, beautiful thing. It's probably fake or whatever. So actually the fact that there are 25,000 Rolexes in the world, at least, that exist with a quartz movement, I can't reconcile it. I wouldn't buy one, I don't think. Okay. But we'll see. But no, I can't reconcile it.
What is it about the watch that makes you feel like you don't want to buy one?
What is it about them? So aesthetically, I think it's really easy to look at this and say, it's cool. It's very visually, it's solid gold, right? So, solid gold with a whatever. That in and of itself is the biggest oxymoron. I'm sat here and I've just changed my mind. I'm going to talk about I've changed my mind. Okay, I wouldn't buy, if Rolex today produced a quartz watch, I wouldn't buy it. Now, I'm not speaking now as a consumer of watches, I'm speaking as a collector of watches and a genuine enthusiast and passionate hobbyist of the history of watches. This is, without doubt, represents one of the most significant periods of watchmaking. It's a period where everybody thought it was all over. You know, we had to put batteries in things, artisanal watchmaking was dead. So they were like, okay, well, we'll still make it solid gold and we'll still put diamonds in the hour markers, but we'll put a battery in it. And this was luxury at the time. This was cool. This was avant-garde, right? And there's only 25,000 of them. So actually, when I say I wouldn't buy one, I actually think I spoke too soon. As a collector, and there are only 25,000 pieces of these that exist in the world, I think there is something quite magical about owning a piece of history and saying Rolex will unlikely never do this again. And even if they do, it will never be the same circumstances. So this, for me, people talk about quartz not having maybe a sense of passion. It doesn't get much more passionate than collecting something because it represents a period of history that you go, well, let me tell you about what was happening here in you know, from the 60s. So actually, no, I would buy an Oysterquartz watch from Rolex, but with significant research to find the exact one, the exact material variant. I'd speak to somebody like James Dowling, like help, you know? So yeah, I would buy one of these. But that is not me saying that I'm in a rush to buy luxury quartz watches. What about you?
I really like the Oysterquartz.
Okay.
For the reasons you mentioned, they're nostalgic, and because Rolex, as you rightly said, would never indulge in something like that again, especially collaborating with other Swiss watch brands on the development of a movement. I just find that part of watch history very intriguing. Sure. And of course, I love contrarian watches. People don't appreciate Oysterquartz for the most part. I mean, it's a respected watch in the collector's sphere, but I think on a more mainstream level, people don't really seek out Oysterquartz Rolexes. So for me, that's added appeal. And also that angular shape. This is like a kind of snapshot in time.
Yep.
there's no Rolex that looks like that anymore, and it's so era specific. And I love that shape. It's reminiscent of so many iconic watches from that same time period, and to me that feels like Rolex's contribution
to the aesthetics of the period. And also, we mentioned the oxymoron that exists in that watch of solid gold, diamond hour markers, and a battery. It almost, I look at it and it screams 1980s Wall Street. But then inside, it's got this dirty little secret. And I think it's like the nerd's little dream, you know? It's I referenced John Mayer probably too much, but in the Talking Watches where he's like, look closer, but look closer still. This watch epitomises yes, but there's one more detail, and then a detail within the detail that actually makes it an important watch, an exciting watch, and perhaps romantic. It brings the romance back, right? Like I think most collectors would say quartz isn't romantic. That is romantic with a quartz watch.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's very characterful. If you look at the watchmaking history of Rolex, that watch has an interesting story, more so than a lot of other models in their range, which says a lot. Yeah. And I think they're a conversation starter.
Without a doubt, without a doubt.
Anyone who is into watches and sees you wearing Oysterquartz is going to have a conversation with you, because people don't really buy those unless they're watch enthusiasts.
Yep. That's so true. I wonder if that's what's cool about it though, is that you when you evolve as a collector, you generally, there are many phases that we all go through, but then you arrive at the beautiful phase, which is I buy what I want and what excites me. And maybe it just takes the right level of research and collector and maybe somewhat education, because we all rely on secondary education from watch articles and magazines and interviews and whatever to really understand this isn't just a cheap Rolex. Because actually that's what I saw it for until about 10 minutes ago, when I had a sort of moment where I realised it wasn't just a Rolex with a battery in it. This is much more than that. And actually without that watch, does Rolex exist the way it does today? Does the watch industry exist the way it is today? Who's to say? I mean, you look at Da Vinci perpetual calendars, they have quartz batteries in them, and there's a real big argument, a real big case to be made that is more important than many modern Rolexes or modern watches at all because of what it represents. So yeah, I think that's really cool. When's this up for auction?
I do wonder whether it's more about the model itself than the fact that it's got a battery in it.
Oh, so you're saying if there was a Daytona with a quartz movement, it would be more popular?
I think it probably would, I think it's more based around popular culture and what people consider to be really popular. I don't think a lot of people actually have a gripe with the fact that there's a battery-powered movement inside there. I think some people do, like if you're a die-hard mechanical watch fan, it's going to put you off. But I think on the flip side, if you're just a watch enthusiast, but you're more interested in the culture and the hype and what people are interested in generally, I don't think the battery inside has a massive impact on the popularity of the watch.
Yeah. If Jay-Z walked out wearing that tomorrow, or John Mayer declares it to be cool, it would just be cool. Because there's nothing, it has all of the ingredients to be cool. It has the Rolex brand. It's interesting. It's got history. It has presence. I mean, this particular reference is solid gold, right? Like, it has presence. It's playful. And the most important thing is it's rare. There actually are a finite amount of them. So maybe it's like anything in life. It's just a cycle that hasn't quite been hit. We're still coming off the back of, jumbos and just integrated bracelets and whatever. She says wearing an integrated bracelet, but maybe there's a hype cycle coming with anything, because it actually does have all the raw ingredients.
It does, and as you alluded to, around 25,000 Oysterquartz watches made back in the day. And in the context of Rolex production, which people estimate they make about 1 million watches a year, that makes Oysterquartz really rare.
Really rare. So when I say I wouldn't buy a quartz watch, or I wouldn't buy a luxury quartz watch, I think when you actually take this in sort of context of what it is, this isn't just, would you buy a Rolex with battery in it? This is, would you, Emily, buy a piece of history? Like, what does this represent? It's not just a case of a cheap Rolex. It's not even a cheap Rolex. It's not a cheap watch. What it actually is is a period in time that, for the discerned collector, for somebody who perhaps loves watches, romanticizes watches, or at least just cares about the industry, what this actually represents is, you know, a period in time where Rolex, like everyone else, thought it was done. The artisanal watchmaker was sort of proverbially dead. Nobody was ever, you know, we're all going to sit in our bloody, I don't know, VR headsets, whatever it was happening in Back to the Future at the time. Everything was going to become battery powered or digitalized. But what Rolex, I think, managed to still maintain was this, like, okay, cool, we'll put a battery in it. But this is solid gold with diamond hour markers. It's not just a watch with a battery in it. It's, for me, I would buy this watch. Now, that surprises me to say. I came in today with a really strong, I would never, I think this is everything that, you know, it's sort of gaudy, maybe a bit gauche. But actually, if I sat down with this watch and got talking to somebody who collects watches, what a conversation, right? Like, no matter who, as long as they're watch collectors, you can go, yeah, this is the period in time when Rolex was this, and it was, you know, like the industry was falling apart, and they all thought this was what the consumer wanted. And clearly, I actually don't know how well they're sold, but the 25,000 units, some being in solid gold, clearly there was a market. But now you look at Rolex, and they couldn't be more different. And perhaps this is a piece of history that it saved Rolex. It saved the Swiss, watch industry in the way we know it today. And of course, Rolex isn't the only watch brand that did it. I think just, you know, going back to RWC, they put their perpetual calendar, the Da Vinci perpetual calendar. You can find so many of those with batteries in them. Would I buy that? Again, my initial reaction is no, but for the same reason I would buy this is, it's a piece of history. It's, if you are a collector, it's cool. It has star power in a way that I think only collectors can really understand.
I agree. I think it's a history lesson. And the people who worked on developing that movement would never have imagined that in 2024, Rolex are back making mechanical movements exclusively, and they're selling 1 million watches a year. This was a time when people were genuinely concerned that the Swiss watch industry was going under. And for that reason, I think that the Oysterquartz is a really interesting proposition for collectors, and I personally would love to own one myself.
You'd love to. Well, actually, I think one thing that we actually spoke about this a few weeks ago is that there's a hint, an unconfirmed hint, that this is Genta influenced. I mean, in 2024, if you put the word Genta around something, so maybe, I don't know, so I won't go too into it, but it's, I mean, even look at the strap, right? It's very Nautilus reminiscent. What do you think?
I agree. We spoke off camera about how the Oysterquartz typifies that 70s angular aesthetic, which we've seen in the Royal Oak, in the Nautilus, and it's been a really popular look in the watch world. Like in fact, that's an understatement. It's been like a phenomenon in the watch world in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years. So you've got that aesthetic with the Rolex name, with an interesting piece of history, with a movement that doesn't exist anymore and probably never will. To me, that ticks a lot of boxes.
I'm going to throw one challenge out to your statement, which was I would buy this watch. I'm with you. I think this is really cool. But I think we are both watch nerds. I think. Fair?
Confirmed, for sure.
Confirmed, I spend more time than I care to admit thinking about watches. So fine, I can see the sort of passionate, logical arrival at, yes, this is really cool. But if, you know, Claudia goes to Rolex and she's made it, you know, she's got the job in this city, she's got 10 grand and whatever, ready for her first bit of luxury. So she bounds into Rolex, and let's imagine that we don't have Rolex today, which is, exhibition only. She can buy whatever she wants to. And she sees this, I don't know, this, and then the equivalent with a mechanical movement. She's trying them on, and maybe this is a few grand cheaper. They look the same to the outside world. She's not buying the modern Rolex with a battery in it. No one is. I firmly, if Rolex did this ever again, I don't see how they could command premiums for it, because there's just no appetite. This is only cool when taken in context of the period. It would not be cool if Rolex tried to charge the same amount as the equivalent in mechanical today. And I also don't think people would warm to it, right? So when you say you'd buy it, would you buy a modern Rolex with the quartz movement?
That's a good question. You kind of stumped me a little bit there. Because I want to say yes, but I think you've uncovered something here, which is part of that desire to own oyster quartz is based on its history, as opposed to being a quartz movement. But what if the quartz proposition from Rolex in the modern day was the same watch but significantly cheaper?
How much cheaper? What are we talking?
2/3 of the price.
2,000. That's still a lot of money. It's still, you know, seven grand on a watch, roughly. There's again, we're talking here as collectors. If you, it's almost the Moonswatch is probably the closest adjacent we can think of in modern watch collecting. People love that watch because it is accessible. No one cares that it's got a battery in it because it's sold as seen, right? It's Swatch. It's Omega and Swatch. But on the outside, you know, it just does look like a it does look like a
Speedmaster.
A Speedmaster.
Yeah.
Thanks there, rescued me. Would there be a market for a solid gold or just a Rolex? Okay, would there be a market for a Daytona sold at 2/3 the price, looks the exact same on the outside? Yes, there's a huge market for that. Because a lot of people just it's luxury, and people like, all of us, we have egos, and there is a sense of, well, as long as it looks the same. If you don't care about what's on the inside and it's cheaper, then maybe that'd be a market. But would Rolex or any luxury brand want to get into a world where you can have a 7 grand version of a 10 grand watch, but with a battery in it and it looks the same? No.
They wouldn't, but then I think about Cartier, right? They offer like...
She destroyed my point.
I was looking through their catalogue the other day and I was like, you can get a Santos Dumont in quartz.
Oh, you've just...
And it's cheaper. And I'm like, that I would consider that, because it is, for the most part, the same watch. They cleverly remove the seconds hand, so you can't see it ticking, and you look at it, you see hours and minutes. I mean, for a lot less money, it's quite a compelling proposition. So there is a market for that, I think.
You've just, okay, fair enough. That is a fair point. That is a fair point. I'm struggling with somewhere to go here. I'm going to throw down and say, Rolex don't need to do it. They really don't. Imagine Patek brought out, you know what they do? They have the Aquanaut, right? They have of course, women's Aquanaut in quartz. And as far as I'm aware, it's not anything special. It's just quartz, as in a battery, not, you know, something like the Elegante. Maybe we're getting into something here. Maybe that's the next move for Rolex. Maybe we've just figured it out. There's a huge market for it. Oh, interesting.
I just think that a lot of those big Swiss companies haven't taken the time to invest in quartz. Like, if they're going to make a quartz movement, it's going to be a fairly generic one. I know Cartier have stepped up a little bit, and they've got solar in the tank, and I think a lot of their quartz movements now have longer battery lives, which I think is a sticking point for a lot of people with quartz. Think I have to replace my battery every 3 years and send it into the brand to do so. I think some of the Cartier ones now run for sort of 8 to 10 years.
Wow, nice.
So they are improving it, but very few manufacturers really take the time to harness and hone quartz movements. And I think about brands like Grand Seiko, where they take pride in quartz.
Yep.
They're like handmade, hand-finished. They're I think the 9F series quartz movements, the thermocompensation, where the movement temperature is checked inside, happens 540 times a day.
Oh, wow.
And they run like a couple of seconds plus or minus a year in terms of accuracy.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother world of quartz, where like they actually believe it is a worthy inclusion inside a luxury watch, and they do it so well. And I don't think a lot of Swiss brands really take the time to invest in it.
Agree. Well, what they've done is they've taken quartz, which is something that it almost feels like you have all this excitement on the outside, and then it's soulless. on the inside. But when you started talking to me then, I confess I don't know very much about the Seiko's quartz movement. But that was really cool, because that's all that watches is. We get interested in the detail, in the why, in the engineering, the over-engineering. And it's good to think that, you know, if I'm buying a watch, that on the inside of it, that's been thought about too. And that's what Quartz, for me, largely neglects, is that I buy, you know, an Aquanaut, and they don't sell it as anything exciting. It's just a quartz watch.
No, exactly. And Seiko has a proud history in quartz. They almost buried the Swiss watch industry with their technology. So perhaps that's part of the problem. The Swiss are still feeling like it's a sore point. They don't want to acknowledge it.
They're still bitter. They're like, no,
Exactly.
we will not bow down to this. That's a really, and I think that leads quite well into a company that, if you want to talk about being romantic and taking something that feels cheap and almost, it's almost like a dirty word. I cannot think that there is simply no other quartz watch in the market that excites me like that. None. But this is a bar none movement. Why? I mean, this is an in-house movement created by F.P. Journe himself, which has star power. It is a product of years of innovation, right? And in a response to a market need, the wives, the sort of husbands going in and wanting other F.P. Journes. But that's all cool, and I think, you know, we'll get into that, I'm sure, but it's not that. It's you pick this thing up, and it's like magic. Like when you watch those hands move as a result of this movement, and they just take the shortest route back, it brings the romanticism back to life in quartz watches. It makes you go, that, you know, that immediate, like, wow moment, which other quartz watches don't do. So they've taken something quite boring and made it almost like a new complication. It's like owning a chronograph now. It's like, but do you have the F.P. Journe quartz movement that does the, you know, the magic hand thing? That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's something novel about that. And I've just come off from saying that the Swiss manufacturers don't spend the time investing in quartz, and this is a contradiction of my statement.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dig into it. So this is the F.P. Journe Elégante, and this is now 10 years in the catalogue. So it was originally introduced in 2014, and I dare say that at the time that it first entered the Journe catalogue, it wasn't the most popular watch, and I don't think it attracted a lot of attention. And as you alluded to, I think F.P. Journe originally created the Elégante for the wives of the men who purchased the watches as a quartz alternative. But you know, the world we live in now is not like that. And this watch is purchased by guys and girls alike. It's very well respected as a quartz watch in the industry. And I think, to your point, there's something novel about it. Yeah, it's quartz and it's beautifully finished. It's got a sapphire case back. You know, there's no shame here. This is on display. This is decorated. And that's another reason why I love it. But as you said, you know, there's something novel about it. It's got an additional feature which we don't usually see in quartz movements. So there's a little micro rotor at 4 o'clock, which I believe detects a lack of movement. Is it 30 minutes?
35 minutes.
35 minutes of
Again, why 5? Why 35? It's just like, just a silly detail, but it's so cool.
I do wonder where they came up with that number from. So 35 minutes of inactivity, the watch goes into like a sleep mode, the hands don't move to preserve the battery, and then when you pick the watch up again, the hands immediately move to the perfect time, to the nearest second.
Yep.
And that's just super cool. You know, from a novel perspective, it's amazing, but also from a practical level too, I think the battery life is somewhere between sort of 10 and 18 years, depending on the level of usage, which is quite incredible.
Wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the hands snap back, it's the shortest route. So they don't go clockwise. If anti-clockwise is the shortest route, that's the way they move. How cool is that? It's a small, but again, nobody who isn't a watch lover or watch collector is collecting F.P. Journe. You have to get into the levels of, oh, I'm really in this now. And even those collectors who are probably own minute repeaters and, you know, rattrapants, whatever, you cannot tell me this isn't cool. it's cool. And I'd never even really thought about the fact it has a sapphire case back until you mentioned it, but maybe it brings back pride. It's pride in quartz. It's pride, because it's not just he's gone, oh, okay, you know, the wives want a watch. I'll just do this and I'll just stick a battery in it. He's gone, I'm proud of what I create. I am a watchmaker. I mean, arguably one of the most important watchmakers of the 21st century. I'm not putting out a watch that I'm not proud of. And this is entirely his, right? That there's nobody else that does this. He came up with this. I think it was 10 years of research, or something along those lines, to come up with this upgrade to quartz. He is to quartz what, and I know that we have different opinions on this, George Daniels is to mechanical watchmaking. George Daniels being somebody that took the lever and kind of was like, aha, I'm going to make a coaxial. I'm going to make this better. I'm going to take a well-accepted standard and make it better. You know, did we talk about service intervals going to 10 years from 4 to 5? That is a small, to the outside world, people don't care. Why do we care about that? But it's kind of the equivalent for quartz. It's not overly accurate, and quartz is typically quite accurate, but it is a level up in what quartz is, or what quartz could be, and certainly what quartz can make you feel. And if we're really honest, luxury watches it's an oxymoron, really. It's not, we don't need these things, but we romanticize them and we get excited about, you know, Rolex went from 40 mil to 41 mil, the world blows up about it. But it really, for me, this watch, and the reason when I picked it up, I fell in love, is it is quite possibly one of the most romantic watches I have engaged with in years. I look at it, I feel something about it, it makes me excited. And no matter which angle you take, you know, the finishing, the heritage, the tech, it's interesting. You know what? I wouldn't have to say I'm talking about an Elegante, and then you know what I'm talking about, right? It's cool. It has made quartz cool again. In my opinion, it's made quartz cool again.
There you have it.
Sorry, Grand Seiko. I'm really sorry. Effie Journe did it.
I think for a watch that was almost like I can't get a chronometer blur from Effie Journe, so like what else is kind of affordable, like relatively speaking, has ended up being something that people have gone, actually, this is a really cool watch with interesting movement that isn't mechanical. It's quartz and it's amazing. And I also think people remembered how convenient quartz watches are too when they buy pieces like this.
Yeah.
You don't ever have to set the time, you put it away in your drawer, especially if you're a collector, so you have like multiple pieces that you don't wear often.
Yeah.
You can just pick that up. The battery could potentially last for like 15 years.
It's so cool.
Never needs to be service changed, and it's always going to tell you the time as soon as you pick it up. The hands are going to snap to the perfect time.
Yep.
Like, it's hard to argue with that.
Without a doubt. And again, this watch, you know, if we go back in time to 2014 when this came out, I think this point resonates still today. This was made or designed for the woman that came in with their partner, and they weren't really into watches, but it was a lifestyle watch. Some stuff I read was, okay, he sort of took the comments back from people and then made a watch for this particular crowd. And I imagine, whether rightly or wrongly, and maybe because I aspire to this lifestyle, I'm not there yet, I gotta keep working now, is that, you know, it's the mum that she gets the kids ready in the morning, and maybe she's running late to work or something, but she's got a quick tennis match before, you know, very Anna Wintour style, but she can wear this watch, well, you know, she can bath the kids, get them ready, you know, maybe have a quick coffee in the morning with the family, run to work, doesn't matter, she doesn't need to worry about selling this watch. She's played tennis, doesn't matter. She's wearing a quartz, you know, watch with a rubber strap. She gets home, maybe she wants to, I don't know, take the dog out for a walk and it's really muddy. Doesn't matter. This watch is a lifestyle watch. It's a take me anywhere, do anything kind of watch that I cannot wait to be that woman who can be like, yeah, this is me. This is the life I lead.
Yeah, and I think as well it appeals to everybody, which for me is part of the appeal of that watch, is that it's not being necessarily purchased by the market that it was originally designed for.
Yep.
And we've seen a constant extension of this line. It's in 2 sizes, in different metals. They've now released versions with different colored sapphires on them. It's gone from being I wouldn't say it's an afterthought watch, because that's like a disrespect to the line, but it was more of a sort of a piece on the side.
Yeah.
And now it's like a mainstream popular Journe piece that everyone wants to own.
I mean, this is going for what, 4 or 5 times retail? Some of them in the 48?
I think in the 48 size, yeah, multiples of retail, and even in the smaller 40, which I still think looks amazing, you know, we're still seeing them very much over the retail price by thousands.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's an accidental cult classic. I don't see this going anywhere. I think it's going to be a line that will be continually evolved by FP Journe. And I personally don't see a world where this quietens down for a while either. It's pretty hot still. Obviously everything's quieting, that the market, you know, is changing, but because again, you cannot get them unless you are an existing customer of FP Journe. There was a time FP Journe wasn't this crazy popular and you could go in and buy stuff. So unless you are an existing customer of FP Journe, you are not getting one of these, at retail at least. So now that drives a real frenzy in the market for people who want to own a bit of FP Journe, but I would say another bit of history. This is history again.
Battery-powered watch selling over retail and unavailable.
Yeah.
Quartz is alive.
Quartz is alive, baby!
I think that's the verdict. Quartz is alive.
Quartz is alive.
Alive and healthy. And I think that feels like a good place to wrap it up.
Which one would you wear?
Out of those 2, that's a really difficult choice. But for me, if this was steel, I would choose the Oysterquartz.
Okay.
But because I'm not a yellow, gold, and diamonds guy, I think I would go for the Journe.
I have to fight you for it then. It's me too.
We're both on the Journe.
We're both Journe.
Well, thanks very much for tuning in, everyone. And thanks a lot, Emily, for coming down for the chat. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
It's been awesome. Thank you for having me.
And make sure to check out Emily's Instagram page. Secret Diver Watch Go is the handle. We'll also put that information in the description as well. If you like the content, please like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon for another controversial topic and some hot takes. Bye for now.